This, this is my last jewelry. My only hope of survival until my husband can find a job.
The billionaire mocked his wife, laughed in her face, called her fat, told her she was an embarrassment. What he didn't know was that the woman he was mocking was about to become the reason he lost everything. This is a story about a billionaire's betrayal and the revenge he never saw coming. In this channel, we bring you amazing folktale stories. Subscribe to grow with us. The insult wasn't new. It had been building for months. But this time it was worse. Are you really going to wear that? Femi's voice cut through the quiet morning. Nengi looked down at her simple, flowy dress. It's a lovely color on you, he said, but his tone was like acid. It just highlights your fullness. He gave a little laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. Nengi's heart ached. He didn't mean it as a joke. He meant it as an arrow. It wasn't always like this. Nengi and Femi's life was once a beautiful, hard-fought story. They started with nothing. She was a kind teacher with a bright smile. He was a dreamer with big plans. They lived in a tiny, two-room flat. They ate cheap food. They held hands and whispered about the future. When Femi's first business failed, Nengi sold her last gold necklace to help him. When his second one barely made any money, she took on extra jobs, cleaning floors after her long school day. People told her to leave him. He's just a dreamer, they said. But Nengi saw something else. She saw a fire inside him, a will to win. She believed in him more than anyone. Then the big break came. A huge oil contract. Money poured in like a river. They moved into a giant mansion. The tiny flat was a distant memory. Nengi quit her teaching job. Femi told her to relax, to finally enjoy life. But with the wealth came a new Femi. He no longer saw her as his partner. He saw her as something old he needed to replace. The small, hurtful comments started. You should really go to the gym, he'd say at dinner. Don't you want to look good for me? I bought you new clothes, he'd say, so you don't look so sloppy. Nengi tried. She went to the gym. She bought new clothes. But the insults never stopped. They were like tiny little cuts, one after another, until her heart felt like it was bleeding. She ate less. She stopped laughing. The vibrant woman Femi once loved was fading, replaced by a ghost of herself. She just wanted her husband back. Then came the night of the big party. Femi's company was celebrating a new deal. All the richest people in the city would be there. Nengi was excited. She bought a beautiful, sparkling dress. She wanted to look her best for Femi. She walked downstairs, her heart beating fast. Femi was waiting for her. He looked so handsome in his suit. But when he saw her, his face went cold. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her, then his phone. He looked at her again and then back at his phone. Nengi's smile faded. What's wrong, Femi? She asked softly. He sighed. He didn't look at her, but at her body. Nengi, he said, his voice flat. Look at you. You don't fit in. You're an embarrassment. A sharp pain shot through Nengi. Femi, I tried. He laughed, but it was a cruel sound. Tried what? Tried to get bigger? You're a joke. You're fat. He spat the word out like a curse. I can't take you to this party. My boss will see you and think I'm weak. I can't have a wife who makes me look bad. Tears welled in Nengi's eyes, but she held them back. He was rejecting her, not just her dress, but her entire self. The woman who had sacrificed everything for him. But who will you take? She asked, her voice a tiny whisper. Femi's face hardened. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Amara? Yes, it's me. Femi, are you ready? I'm outside. Nengi's blood ran cold. Amara was his business partner's daughter. A beautiful, slim, powerful woman. He was taking another woman to the party. He was replacing her. Femi turned to leave. My lawyers will call you in the morning, he said, without looking back. It's over. The front door slammed shut. Nengi stood alone in the grand entrance hall, her beautiful dress feeling heavy and suffocating. The tears she had been fighting finally fell, but they were no longer from sadness. They were from a deep, burning rage. He had built his wealth on her sacrifice, and now he was throwing her away for a newer, shinier model. He thought he had won. He thought she was broken. He was about to learn that she wasn't broken at all. She was just getting started. He had no idea what she was capable of. The real game was about to begin. The mansion was quiet now, a grand, empty tomb. Nengi's rage had cooled into a hard, cold focus. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to cry. She was going to act. She went to her closet, a room filled with designer clothes Femi had bought for her, most of which she'd never even worn. She grabbed a small, worn bag from the back of a shelf. It was the same bag she'd used to carry her books when she was a teacher. It felt like holding a part of her old, true self. Instead of packing her clothes, she went to Femi's office. The door was unlocked. He had been so sure she would just leave. He was wrong. She wasn't looking for money or jewelry. Femi's wealth was easy to find, but hard to touch. It was all tied up in bank accounts she couldn't access. No, she was looking for something else. Something he thought was worthless. She remembered years ago, when Femi was working on his big pitch for the oil company, he would stay up all night. He was so paranoid about losing his work. He'd print everything, making copies of every single contract and proposal, then hide them in a special place. Nengi's eyes scanned the room. She ran her hand along the bookshelf, feeling for a loose book, a hidden latch. Her fingers brushed against an old, heavy dictionary. It felt out of place. She pulled it out. Behind it was a small metal safe. A cheap one. Femi had always been cheap about the little things. She didn't know the code, but she knew his habits. He liked numbers that were easy to remember, important dates. She tried their anniversary date. Nothing. Their birthdays. Nothing. Then she remembered a date he had carved into the wall of their old apartment when they first moved in. The day he had the first idea for his business. It was so long ago, she almost forgot it. She typed in the numbers. The lock clicked. Inside, she found what she was looking for. Not money, but thick folders filled with papers. Old contracts, documents from when his company was just starting. Her heart hammered in her chest. These were the original papers, the real deal. They had his signature, his company's name, and she gasped, her eyes widening as she read a line on one of the documents. There was a secret clause, a silent partnership she had completely forgotten about. A small percentage of the company's shares, her shares. Femi had put them in a trust for her, a promise from their struggling days. He had done it without telling her. It was a secret gift, a way to protect her if anything ever happened to him. And he had forgotten about it. The papers were still valid. He had never dissolved the trust. As she stuffed the documents into her bag, a text message popped up on her phone. It was from a number she didn't know. A picture. It was Femi at the party, his arm around Amara, the boss's daughter. They were smiling and laughing. Nengi felt a fresh wave of betrayal, but it quickly turned into cold fury. He was already celebrating her downfall. Nengi left the office, walking out of the mansion and into the night. She didn't call a taxi. She just walked, the bag clutched tightly in her hands. The city was a blur of lights and noise, but she didn't notice. All she could think about was the documents in her bag and the secret they held. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. Femi thought he was a king, but he had forgotten the queen. And the queen had a plan. But her first move was the most dangerous, one of all. She had to go back to the one place she swore she'd never return to, the one place she felt safest and most terrified at the same time. The one place where no one would ever think to look for her. She had to go home. Nengi's old neighborhood was a world away from Femi's mansion. The streets were narrow, the houses were small, and the air smelled of grilled corn and car exhaust. This was home. This was where she had been Nengi, the strong teacher, before she became Femi's wife. She walked through the familiar streets, the heavy bag of documents clutched tight. Her mind raced with a mix of fear and determination. She knew exactly where she was going. She stopped in front of a small, one-story house. It was her brother's house, Kachi. He had been her rock, her best friend, the one person who had warned her about Femi's changing heart. But after Femi got rich, he had slowly cut Nengi off from her family. He said they were holding her back. Nengi, blinded by her love for him, had listened. She had become a ghost to her own family. She knocked on the door. It was opened by her sister-in-law, a kind woman named Ada. Ada's eyes went wide with shock. "Nengi? Is that you? We haven't heard from you in years." Ada's voice was a mix of happiness and confusion. Nengi just nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. It was all so strange. This small, simple house felt more like home than the huge mansion she had just left. The smell of stew and spices filled the air. Ada hugged her tight. Then Kachi came out. He was a tall, strong man, but his face was filled with a hurt she had caused. "Nengi," he said, his voice quiet. He didn't hug her. "Why are you here? After all this time?" Nengi couldn't speak. She just handed him the heavy bag. He looked at it, confused, then opened it. His eyes fell on the old documents, and the shock on his face was clear. He began to read, his brow furrowed, and a look of disbelief spread across his features. "What is this?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "These are company documents and a trust." He looked up at her, his expression a mix of awe and anger. "Nengi, do you know what this is?" "This trust, it gives you ownership in Femi's company. A huge percentage. He signed these years ago, before the big contract." The weight of her secret felt lighter now that it was out in the open. Nengi finally found her voice. She told him everything. How Femi had mocked her, called her fat, and thrown her out for Amara. She spoke of the years of little insults and the big, final betrayal. Kachi's face went from shock to pure fury. He slammed his fist on the table. "I knew it," he roared. "I knew he was no good. He used you. He took everything from you, and then just threw you away." Nengi was scared he would rush out and confront Femi, but he stopped. He picked up one of the documents and read a line again, his eyes focused on a specific detail. A moment of silence passed, and then a look of deep concern replaced his anger. "Nengi, there's a problem," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "This document, it's a valid trust, yes, but it has a clause. You can only get the shares if you meet certain conditions. It says you have to use the funds from the trust to start your own business. Not just any business, but one that directly competes with Femi's new projects. If you don't do it, the trust becomes void in 2 years." Nengi's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a simple gift. It was a test, a race against time. Just then, a loud, urgent knock rattled the front door. Nengi jumped. Kachi looked through the peephole. His eyes went wide. He quickly ushered Nengi and the documents into a back room. "It's Femi's driver," Kachi whispered, his voice low and tense. "He's here. He must have found out you took the papers." He quickly looked at Nengi, his eyes filled with a new kind of fear. "He's with someone else. A big man with a fancy suit. They're looking for you, Nengi. Femi knows." The knocking on the door got louder, more urgent. Nengi's heart hammered against her ribs. She was cornered. She squeezed into a tiny, dark storage room and pulled the door shut just as Kachi opened the main door. Through the thin wall, Nengi could hear voices. Femi's driver, a man named Tund, was asking questions in a demanding voice. "We know Nengi is here. Where is she? Who is Nengi?" Kachi's voice was calm, too calm. "You have the wrong house, sir." But the other man with Tund wasn't fooled. His voice was deep and sharp. "Don't play games. We saw her on the street. There was a rustling sound like paper. We also know what she took. The documents. The originals. Tell us where she is, and this can be easy." Nengi held her breath. She clutched the bag of documents to her chest. He knew. Femi had found out. Maybe he had a hidden camera in the safe, or maybe he had just noticed the missing documents and put 2 and 2 together. She had to get out. She looked around the tiny room. A small window, high up, was her only hope. It was dusty and covered in spiderwebs. It was too small for a person to fit through easily, but Nengi was no longer the woman who had grown comfortable in a mansion. She was the fighter from the slums. She pushed on a rusty crate and climbed up. The window was stuck. She pushed again and again, her muscles straining. Outside, she could hear Kachi arguing with the men. He was trying to buy her time. A crash from the living room told her he had likely thrown a punch. With a final, desperate push, the window squealed open. Nengi squeezed through, scraping her skin on the sharp edges. She dropped to the ground, landing in a small, overgrown backyard. She didn't look back. She ran. She ran through narrow alleys she hadn't seen in years. She ran past kids playing, past women selling food on the street. She was a ghost running through her own past. Her mind raced. Femi wasn't just angry, he was scared. He wouldn't send a big, scary man and his driver for a few simple papers. These documents, the ones he had forgotten about, must be worth a lot. More than she had ever imagined. The thought gave her a jolt of strength. She had to find a way to use them, but she couldn't stay in the city. Femi had too many people, too much power here. She ran all the way to a small bus stop. An old bus was getting ready to leave. "Where are you headed?" she asked the driver, out of breath. "Lagos," he said, not even looking at her. "Leaving now." Lagos. It was a big, fast city. The perfect place to disappear. The perfect place to start a new life. She bought a ticket and got on, hiding in the back. As the bus pulled away, she looked out the window. She saw a black SUV turn onto her street, tunned in the driver's seat. He was looking everywhere. She held her breath, a knot of fear and excitement in her stomach. The bus picked up speed. Nengi knew her old life was over. She was now a woman on the run, with a secret. She had nothing but the clothes on her back and a bag full of old papers. She had to build something new from scratch, just like Femi had. But the documents had a condition. She had to use them to start a competing business. The 2-year clock was ticking. She had to win this race. And if she failed, she would lose everything she had left. The years were kind to Nengi. Not because they were easy, but because they forged her into a new person. The fat Femi had mocked was gone, replaced by the lean, powerful frame of a woman who had worked tirelessly. She had built a new life in Lagos, far from the shadows of her past. She had used the trust money to start a small logistics company, just as the clause in the documents required. It was a risky business, but Nengi knew the ins and outs of transport from her struggling days with Femi. She started with 1 truck and a whole lot of hustle. The name of her company was Phoenix Logistics. Like the mythical bird, she had risen from the ashes. Her company grew, slowly at first, then exploded. She was smart, honest, and she worked harder than anyone. She made deals, signed contracts, and proved everyone wrong. She became the queen of her industry, a force to be reckoned with. And Femi, with his big, flashy company, was her rival. He didn't even know it. Not yet. He had no idea that his biggest competitor, the one eating into his profits, was the fat embarrassment he had thrown away. He was still trying to find the missing documents, still sending his lawyers to look for the thief. He had no idea the thief was right under his nose. The day came for the big merger. 2 giant companies were coming together, and both Nengi and Femi were bidding for a massive contract with the new company. The winner would control a huge part of the market. The stakes were higher than ever. Nengi walked into the boardroom, her head held high. She wore a simple, elegant suit that fit her perfectly. Her face was calm, her eyes sharp. She saw him across the room. Femi. He was older now, but just as arrogant. He was with Amara, the boss's daughter, now his wife. She saw the flash of recognition in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. He knew her, but he didn't know her. Not the new her. "Nengi," he whispered, but the room was too loud for anyone to hear. The meeting started. Femi went first. He gave a slick presentation, full of big promises and empty words. Nengi watched him, a small, knowing smile on her face. He was the same old Femi. All flash, no substance. Then it was her turn. She stood up and walked to the front of the room. She held a clicker in her hand. "My name is Nengi." She didn't say her last name. "And my company, Phoenix Logistics, is here to show you how a company built on trust and hard work can deliver what you need. She started her presentation. She spoke with a clear, strong voice. She showed the room charts, figures, and solid plans. She talked about her company's history, and a quiet gasp filled the room. The name of the company that had a stake in Femi's business was one of her old partners. He never knew it was her. Femi stood up.
Wait.
What is this? This is impossible, he yelled. It's not impossible, Femi, Nengi said, her voice like steel. It's called justice. She clicked to the next slide, a picture of the old, original document she had taken from his safe. The one with his signature and her name. Gasps filled the room. The men and women in suits whispered to one another. He had tried to get rid of her, and now her name was a part of his company. It would be a huge scandal. Nengi looked at Femi. His face was pale. Amara, his wife, looked at him with a mix of shock and disgust. You have another problem, Femi, Nengi said, her voice cold. When you called me fat and threw me out, you didn't know the truth. You just thought I was eating too much because I was lazy. Her voice got softer, but more painful. What you didn't know was that I was pregnant. Pregnant with your child. My cravings were out of control, and my body was changing. The same cravings that you mocked, the same body that you ridiculed, was carrying the next generation of your blood. The room fell silent. Femi's eyes widened in horror. He didn't know. He had mocked a pregnant woman.
His wife.
His face turned as white as a sheet. Where's the child? He whispered. Nengi looked at him, her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of a deep, sorrowful kind of triumph. She clicked the button on her hand. The screen behind her showed a beautiful picture of a smiling little boy, no older than 4. His eyes were Femi's eyes, but his smile was all hers. This is our son, Femi, and he is a trust too. It's for his education, all set up from my company's shares. He's growing up to be smart, kind, and loving. All the things you stopped being a long time ago. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run, and you have a scandal to deal with. The room was completely silent. Every eye was on Nengi and then on Femi, and then on the image of the little boy on the screen. The air was thick with shock and shame. Femi's arrogance had crumbled, leaving behind a man stripped of his pride. Amara, his wife, looked at him with a mix of fury and disgust, her face a mask of betrayal. She had married a man who had not only abandoned his first wife, but also a child he didn't even know existed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories, and see you in our next video.